Over the last 7 years I've been on YouTube, this will be the very first time I ever do a web developer roadmap. So this is my first web developer roadmap for 2024. Let's get into this. So I'll be doing this a little differently. I'm not doing any crazy animations or anything. I'm only going to be using Notion for this particular roadmap. And why? So I can give y'all access to this roadmap in the link in the description below. All you need to do is subscribe to my newsletter and you get access to everything from my JavaScript cheat sheet to my terminal cheat sheet, Visual Studio Code text editor cheat sheet, plus this web developer roadmap for 2024, which I will make sure to update throughout the year if anything changes. So let's get into this. So web developer roadmap. Let's start with number 1, right? What is web development? This can be a very simple answer, as in it's front-end development and back-end development. But I think it's also much more than that, right? So it is coding, but I'd like to say it's much more than just coding too. When it comes to web development, it's about creating a digital environment, like a digital world that's intuitive, responsive, and engaging for the user, the viewer on that browser, right? So as we come to 2024 and as technology is rapidly advancing, the role of web development has become more crucial than ever, right? And so let's go over the role of web developers. So what does a web developer actually do? In simple terms, web developers create a front-end, create a website and applications, right? And combining the aesthetics of both front-end development and the functionality of back-end development. Front-end development will use technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript libraries, CSS, HTML libraries, right? To create all these different things. Now, in simple terms, what does a web developer actually do? A web developer creates websites and applications, right? But combining the aesthetics of front-end development with the functionality of back-end development. So front-end development focuses on, like we could say, the look and feel of a site, using tools, technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create a user-friendly interface, while back-end development, on the other hand, involves server-side logic and database management. Ensuring that the website operates efficiently and effectively behind the scenes when what no one sees, right? Now, I think a question I get often is, how long does it take to become a web developer? How long, let's just say, does it take to actually learn code? It really depends. Let's say when it comes to the basics, to learn the basics when it comes to vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I'd say 3 to 6 months. And when I say 3 to 6 months to learn this, I mean, you're just learning how languages work. That's it. You're just learning how languages work, meaning you're learning how HTML works, CSS, JavaScript, how to write a function, how to write a loop, but you don't know exactly how to put a full website together. And so how long does this take? Depending on your dedication and the time you put into it, 3 to 6 months. Some people might take a year, depending if you're working a full-time job. I was working 3 full-time jobs when learning how to code. And so it took me time, although I was fortunate to get a job in only a couple of months. But again, the first couple months, you're only learning how languages work. And I'm going to dive more into how to go beyond that later in this roadmap. Now, next is your journey to senior, but let's change this, your journey to your first job, right? Let's kind of change it to that. So in the first year, I'd say expect to learn the fundamentals of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and start building simple websites after the 3 to 6 month mark, right? And then as you progress and dive into more complex topics like responsive web design, making a website more mobile friendly, right? JavaScript frameworks, and we'll dive into that later in here. And then back-end programming, if you want to move that direction, the key to learning all these advanced things is being consistent. And the differences between learning the basics and then going past that to moving into something even more complex is you're going from only learning how languages work to now you need to build things using the languages you learned. The mistake that a lot of people make when trying to learn web development is they're just using tutorials. That's it. They think that's all you need. No, I'm telling you this, no tutorial is good enough to teach you to become 100% web developer, front-end developer, back-end developer, you name it. You need to build things. And I'm mentoring so many different people. If you want to check it out in the description below too. But I'm mentoring so many different people right now. And the mistake that a lot of these people are making is that they're only using tutorials and sticking to that, thinking that's it. No. Build. Even if you don't know everything, build, and you'll learn faster than you ever thought you could. And I'm speaking for myself too, right? And so Things that you'll start learn. You're building things with HTML, CSS. You'll eventually learn how to use like a CSS library like Tailwind, which dive into. Then JavaScript libraries like React or Svelte or a framework like Angular. But how long does it actually take to become a developer in this economy, especially? I'd say 1 or 2 years now. Now, before we dive deeper into other things, I want us to look at some simple tools that every developer needs to know right off the bat. So text editors, right? Now, text editors are a crucial tool in a developer's arsenal, right? They're where you'll spend most of your time coding. So choosing the right one is important as well, right? So some text editors I've used in the past and use now are Sublime Text, as Visual Studio Code, Atom, and now JetBrains, especially as I'm transitioning to the machine learning, NLP space, just learning for fun, not for a living. It's not my job. Something I'm diving into for fun. So I'm using JetBrains, which is much more advanced. But these are, I would say, probably the more popular text editors that exist right now that a lot of people use, right? Some cool features of popular text editors, which is why we love them rather than using Notepad or something. One of my first text editors I've used in the past as a junior developer was Notepad++ on a Windows computer. Is number one, auto completion, right? It just makes it easier to write your code. Syntax highlighting, right? I'll give you an example. Let's see if I have Visual Studio Code open. Here you go. So I'm building something in Astro. And so syntax highlighting, it's easier to read your code, right? So as you're looking at this, there's things highlighted in blue, things highlighted in white, meaning, it's just easier to read your code in general, right? And there are extensions. If I open up Visual Studio Code again, let me open up the simple index HTML file. This is someone's code I was helping with. He's just writing something, helping him build something. But a cool extension on here that exists is there's something, you might not be able to see this, at the bottom of this text editor, you see prettier. And what this does, this makes your code more presentable and easier to read, organize it for you. And then there's also something called Go Live, an extension. What this does is that it shows you live updates to your website that you're building, your application you're building, as you're building it. So you know that if you wrote some code that broke your website, you don't wait until 30 minutes to find out what caused it. You know it immediately. So these things are pretty useful. So, and also another thing I think that's huge, that can be very helpful and something I never really took seriously into my career until 4 years into my career, are keyboard shortcuts when it comes to using these text editors. So I do have a Visual Studio Code keyboard shortcut in my Notion templates. I have in the link description below. So for example, when you subscribe to my newsletter, I'll have all these simple things like my recent podcasts. I just moved this. I shouldn't have done that. This will have my recent podcasts, my cheat sheets, and this shouldn't be here, right? So I have my JavaScript cheat sheet on here. I have my terminal tips for the terminal, and text editor here. So check that out if y'all want to check it out. It's free below, right? Now let's move on to GitHub. Right, so GitHub is amazing, right? When you look at GitHub, it's known for its code repositories. And for those who don't know what a repository is, it's like a folder. Another word for it is folder. So let me open up one of my text editors here. Right now, I'm building something in Astro, a website. And in this folder, if you look at my files here, I have a folder named Astro3. And what do I mean by that? If I open up my Finder, just want to help make this easier for y'all to understand. So I have a folder on my desktop, and the folder for this is Astro3, Peaceful Pegasi, whatever. And in this folder is all my code. So literally, it's just a folder hosting your code, right? That's what this is. And so when it comes to GitHub, when we call things a repository, it's another way of calling something a folder, right? It's another way of calling something a folder instead that hosts your code. But GitHub is more than just a code repository. GitHub is a vital tool for things like collaboration with open source. It teaches you things like version control. What is version control? For example, let's say you build your website and you're writing code, and let's say 2 days into you're writing your website, you realize, oh my God, I don't like this version of this website that I'm building. I just broke everything. I want to go back to what I was building 5 days ago, and you're able to revert back to your older versions, right? You also learn things like, I said open source already, but also being able to showcase your work in the internet. This is very important, especially if you want to get a job, because as you're learning code, I highly recommend you create your repositories for the stuff that you're building, even if it's simple. And you every day, at the end of the day, or twice a day, morning and the evening, you push that code to your repository for the world to see. And if you want to see why that's important, I have a video on how to stay ahead of 99% of developers in the internet on my YouTube channel. And then on GitHub, one thing that they have, which is pretty amazing, is that they have something called GitHub Pages, right? So GitHub Pages, you can host your web projects directly from your code repository, right? Your GitHub repository. This will provide a convenient platform for showcasing your work to potential hiring managers. But again, this is amazing because you learn and understand Git commands for version control. You learn to manage your own branches and what is a pull request as you make a pull request to your own repo and to someone else's repo. But these things are so amazing. It's simple, but this will go a long way. Have you ever dreamed of building your own mobile application but felt stuck because building your own mobile app is kind of hard? Well, let me introduce you to At My Site, an app builder that's changing the game for everyone. Now, with At My Site, building an app is a breeze. You can get started in as little as a few minutes, and the best part, no coding needed. It's the perfect solution whether you're running a blog, an e-commerce site, or just trying to build your portfolio to help you get your first job in tech. Now, here's how it works. Connect your website to At My Site with just a few clicks. Personalize the app to reflect your style, and you're ready to publish immediately. And it's that simple. You can have your Android or iOS application ready and live in app stores in no time. And what about making your own app stand out? At My Site has got you covered. Customize every single part of your app to align with your vision. Play around with colors, designs, features to make your app uniquely yours. And this tool is great for anyone. Whether you have just a normal website, a freelancer, or again, just trying to show off your portfolio, At My Site's versatile plans cater to everyone. It's about creating a professional, quality app without the high cost or time commitment of the traditional app development process. Think about it. Users have saved over $50,000 per app and thousands of hours in development time. At My Site makes app development quick, easy, and guess what? Budget friendly. So why not start today? Sign up for free, create your own app, and see it in action. Only upgrade when you're ready to publish. It's time to uncomplicate app development and turn your website into a powerful app with At My Site, which is available on AppSumo during the Black Friday sale that runs from today to December 1st in the link in the description below. So let's move on now. Now let's go on to what technologies you need to learn, what languages, markup languages, programming languages, front and back. Let's get into that now for this roadmap. So now, one of the first things that you will learn is HTML, right? So HTML is the foundation of web pages in the internet, right? On the web. HTML means going beyond just knowing tags. I'd say it's about understanding how to structure a web page effectively, right? So, for example, we have the header, body, and footer down here. The header typically contains the navigation and branding elements right top of the page. There's the body, and the body is where the main content resides, and the footer often includes additional information like your contact details and legal disclaimers. So understanding those basic things. But of course, there's more than that, just that alone, the semantic markup, right? So when crafting HTML, it's important to focus on semantic markup, ensuring that elements like the headings, the paragraphs, and lists are used correctly. But why? For things like better accessibility, people who might have a harder time using the internet, browsing internet, and SEO to help people find that particular website you're building for your employer. So now let's move on to CSS. So CSS is what brings life to your website, right? To your web pages. And to be honest, in web development in general, CSS is styling, making your website beautiful. For example, without CSS, your website looks like Craigslist.com. With CSS, your website could look like Netflix. It could look like Apple.com, which are beautiful websites, right? But CSS is about creating something responsive, and fun to interact with, right? So understanding how to use fonts, colors effectively, positioning effectively. Oh my gosh, and that's very hard. It's crucial in setting the tone and feel of your website. Extremely important, but there are also advanced things that you'll need to learn in CSS, not just regular CSS. So you need to learn advanced layout techniques like Flexbox, CSS Grid, which have become essential for creating responsive designs. And this didn't really become that much popular or much more demand until, I'd say, 3 years of my career in tech, and I've been in tech for 7 years, right? So for those of you who don't know, Flexbox, what that does is that it simplifies the process of creating flexible layouts, while CSS Grid offers more control for complex two-dimensional layouts, right? Now there's also something called Sass, which is a CSS processor. I use this a lot. I love it. And what this does is this allows you to write more maintainable and scalable code with features like, for example, with Sass, I don't have this on here, you're able to create variables with CSS, right? You can have some nested rules, mix-ins, media queries, which are also crucial. But this Sass would make, and yes, Sass would make writing custom media queries for your website easier and more achievable for multiple different kinds of browsers and phones that are being used to browse your website, right? But on the top of that, there are also CSS frameworks that we need to move on to, right? So frameworks like Bootstrap, Materialize, and Tailwind have changed the game for CSS development, to be honest. I don't ever want to go back to using vanilla CSS ever again, unless it's a basic website. But these frameworks, what they do is that they offer, like, for example, pre-designed components and utilities that speed up the development process, meaning it allows you to create websites faster than ever. What would take me probably a whole day to write with CSS, I can now build in a couple hours to Materialize. Tailwind now is changing the game. It's becoming increasingly more popular too. Now let's move on to JavaScript, right? So after you learn all HTML, CSS, you want to move to JavaScript. JavaScript is the powerhouse of web development of the internet, right? JavaScript is what makes us and will allow us to make the money we're making right now, to be honest, right? How good you are in JavaScript will determine how well someone should pay you, right? Your experience too, of course. But JavaScript, it's indispensable for creating dynamic user experience, right? There will be core concepts that you need to learn. For example, loops, functions, event handling, which are the building blocks of JavaScript programming. But there are also more modern features you'll need to learn. JavaScript features things like arrow functions, which offer more concise syntax for writing functions. There's destructuring, which simplifies the extraction of data from arrays and objects. Template literals, which provide an easy way to create complex strings. So practical examples for this might include things like creating interactive forms, dynamic content loading, and client-side validation. So you'll need to learn all these different things. Now, again, I do have a JavaScript cheat sheet in the link description below in my newsletter. And again, I'm only mentioning because this will help you out a lot. Like, for example, on my cheat sheet right here, on this cheat sheet, I literally give you questions that people might ask you on your interview, for your job interview. Right. So if someone was to ask you, how do you define the variables? This gives you the answers. Let's move down a little bit. Can you explain what a lexical scope is? I give you the answer and code examples, object arrays. And you know what? Something I was even asked to do on my Amazon interview. And this was when I was only 3 years into my career at Amazon. They asked me to build a to-do list, which I've never done before. And they said I can build it in ReactJS, Angular, or vanilla. And I didn't do it. And so here is a tutorial on how to build a simple to-do list. So this is the code on how to do it and then build it yourself, right? And I have it in Svelte.js, I have it in vanilla and ReactJS for you, right? So all these things that I have on here, I have because I'm hoping it will help you get your first job in tech. So now let's move on. Now, something I've been seeing on tech Twitter a lot, oh my God, is TypeScript. So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, right? Which has gained so much momentum and popularity in tech Twitter, right? And so what TypeScript does is that it introduces static typing, right? It introduces, I didn't even type this in here, static typing, making your code more predictable and less prone to runtime errors, which is especially beneficial in large-scale application. I think it's just beneficial in general. Now, some TypeScript basics include defining types for variables, creating interfaces for complex data structures, and leveraging TypeScript's features to catch errors during development, right? TypeScript is something I definitely add to the list. It's not absolutely necessary, but a lot of companies use TypeScript. So I would make sure to learn TypeScript next. So now you're learning vanilla JavaScript, you learn TypeScript. Now what will really help you get the job down the line is React. But before we move to React, right, when it comes to JavaScript, even my homie who works at Netflix, Trash Dev, Christian, amazing guy, Filipino brother. When I asked him what questions they asked him during the technical interview, and when he did his technical interview, meaning writing code in front of a senior developer there, they told him to write code in vanilla JavaScript. And I asked him, why vanilla? Why not React? And he said, if you're good at vanilla JavaScript, then you can write code in any JavaScript library framework out there. And that's a mistake I made in my career. I wanted to be good in ReactJS or Svelte.js or Vue.js at the time, before Svelte.js. But I wasn't that good in vanilla JavaScript. But if I was good in vanilla JavaScript, the other way around, learning React would have been so much easier. Learning Svelte.js would have been so much easier. So I highly suggest, before moving to React, you make it a big goal to make sure you're strong in vanilla JavaScript, and it'll only make learning these frameworks, these libraries, so much easier, right? So let's move to these libraries. So popular libraries that exist today in JavaScript are React, Vue, and Svelte, which makes it easier to write JavaScript, right? So React, Vue, and Svelte, and there's also Angular, are pretty much leading the charge in modern web application development today, right? So React's component-based architecture enables reusable UI elements, while Vue offers a more approachable learning curve. To be honest, it's easy to learn with its progressive framework. And there's also Svelte.js, which is popping off right now, which shifts much of the work to compile time, reducing the need for virtual DOM diffing, right? But choosing the right framework is important. And to be honest, this really depends on what you want to learn. If you want to think about what's more in demand today with the jobs out there, ReactJS is the way to go. It really is. It really is. If I had to start over now, after learning and building a strong foundation in vanilla JavaScript, I'd learn ReactJS. So now let's talk about preparing for the job market after learning all these tools as a front-end developer. And of course, there's so much more to learn, and we'll dive into that. Preparing for the job market, right? And so what I'll have in here are simple things. These are things that people look for when hiring: strong problem-solving skills, being able to know a little bit about data structures and algos. Why? Data structures for the interview and algos, to be honest. But more than anything, strong problem-solving skills. Now, I can leave it here and say that's all you need to learn, but I think it's so much more than that, right? So what I have on here is what else can help you prepare for the job market is you need to learn how to show your potential. Again, I have a video on this, so I won't dive into it too much about staying ahead of 99% of web developers out there. But having a bunch of green checkboxes on your GitHub will help you go a long way. Showing them and proving to them how often you write code, let's say 5 days a week minimum. And not just that though, how else do you stay ahead of the game? Show your potential. Don't make the mistake, again, of depending on tutorials, but more than anything, build. I mean it, like literally more than tutorials. You go through a HTML and CSS course once, a JavaScript tutorial once, a React course once, a Postgres course once, you know what I mean? Everything once. And after that, you just build. You literally just build things. I'm not going to recommend you what to build, but just build and build every single day. That is how you'll learn, especially as you host these projects in your repos on GitHub and showcase that to potential hiring managers. It'll be much easier for you to stand out from the crowd of thousands of people applying for that one job that everyone wants, right? Now, tools for modern web development, simple things you need to learn: terminal, Git, developer tools. Again, I have a terminal cheat sheet in the link description below. Now, let's move on to exploring backend. I don't need to go through this. I know this video is long as hell already, but I want to make this as helpful as possible because, yes, as a front-end developer, you're doing front-end. You don't necessarily need to know backend, but while knowing just a little bit of backend development help you, yes, it will, right? It will help you a lot in the long term. You don't need to learn this right away. I say focus more on front-end development first, then slowly transition and just build a few things here and there in backend. While front-end development focuses on what users see and interact with, backend development is concerned with what happens behind the scenes, right? So this section that I'm gonna go over introduces server-side languages and databases crucial for building the functionality backend of a website. So let's understand a little bit more server-side programming. And what I mean is just the languages that you might want to learn. Now, not any of these are like, you have to learn all of this. No, there's a lot more than this too. But I'd say learning at least one of these is very important. PHP, I know my homie Coding Face talks about this a lot. I'd say skip PHP. But if you had to learn backend, I'd say Python. Now, if you're a web developer, JavaScript. But to be honest, I like Python a lot. That's what I'm doing now as I'm diving into the machine learning and NLP space, natural language processing space. I'd say learn Node.js for web development. and a little bit of Python, right? Once you learn JavaScript, it's much easier to learn these backend server-side programming languages, right? So for example, Node.js is an open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment. And what this does is that it executes JavaScript outside of a web browser. Python is a widely admired programming language. Why though? Really, it's because of its readability. It's very easy to read compared to freaking JavaScript, by the way. And its efficiency, making it a popular choice for web development, right? And then last but not least, there's PHP, which is very popular for smaller companies, right? So PHP is a service scripting language used to make web pages interactive and etc. So these are some popular server-side programming languages. Of course, there's more. But now let's move on to databases, which you would want to learn down the line too, right? So databases in web development store and manage data that websites and applications use and display, right? So they're crucial for dynamic content, anything that changes based on user input, like what they type into the input, right, onto a website, and or external data sources, right? And then there are also databases. One of the more popular relational databases that exists out there, and I personally use PostgreSQL or Postgres. You don't have to say PostgreSQL. It's Postgres and SQL. Personally, if I had to choose something to use, a database to learn first, I'd say Postgres. And of course, to be able to do that, you have to learn SQL, which is a query language. Now, I want to end it here. This video is getting longer than I thought it would be. So in conclusion, just talking about this entire roadmap, the journey through web development is hard as hell. Okay, it is hard as hell. Front-end development, in terms of HTML and CSS, to backend server-side programming languages like Python, Node.js, and then learning Postgres or MySQL, how to work with those databases and SQL. It's a long journey. It's hard as hell. But this doesn't happen overnight, right? As we look at this, looking at all of this, this is a lot. Let me just back you out a little bit, making it smaller. This is a lot that you have to learn. Just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript alone will take 3 to 6 months, let alone how to use a terminal, using CSS frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, TypeScript, React, and then building your projects. Then you need to learn data structures and algos for the job interview, even though it's not really relevant to your job. And then if you want to learn backend or go full stack, you learn Python, SQL, right? This is not an easy journey. And this will not happen overnight. Please understand, this will not happen overnight. This is something that you learn over time, over months, over years. But what's important is that you learn how to learn the right way. You don't get stuck in tutorial hell. You don't just depend on tutorials, and you're building projects, and you accept that it's okay and it's normal to not know everything, and it's normal to struggle. That will happen. It's when it comes to learning code and moving on with this, you want to learn to look forward, embrace uncommon challenges that will come upon you when trying to solve these problems. Because for the rest of your career, you're not going to be knowing what you're doing. You need to learn how to learn and fail, right? So remember that your journey in web development is unique. Whether you're just starting or seeking to enhance your skills, the road ahead of you will be full of a lot of opportunities, but even more than opportunities, road bumps and hills that you need to climb, and you're going to fall a lot. But remember to stay consistent. Remember, it's not easy, but is it worth it? Hell yeah. Is it worth it for me? If I can do it, y'all can do it.